Last week, we reported that the board game Descent: Legends of the Dark is on its way to the masses, and Oz is incredibly excited to tell us all about it. Oz, what can we expect from this game, and why are you so hyped?
All right, thanks, Bobby. So, Descent: Legends of the Dark is a dungeon delver board game by Fantasy Flight Games, driven by an app that takes over the role of an overlord, which is like a dungeon master figure. And it's planned for release in Q2 of 2021. This is going to be one of 3 boxes, and we begin with Act 1, which comes with a full 16-quest campaign, forming a complete storyline with no cliffhangers, but with a few hints and threads as to what's going to come in Acts 2 and 3. Now, I've only ever played Descent 2nd Edition when it got app integration, which took over the GM's role and provided a full campaign plot with intricately designed dungeon experiences with unique goals that never felt stale. And having played 2 full campaigns, Kindred Fire and Naricall, with the same group, we obviously thought it was an excellent experience. But this is the first time Descent is built from the ground up with app integration in mind, and the designers have taken various opportunities to push what interactions between app and board games can do to heighten the player experience. And I believe this will be the coolest Dungeon Delver game to date. Game masters for D&D or other systems typically struggle with bringing all elements of level design, plot, roleplay, or tactics into perfect cohesion. So being able to have an app that takes all of that responsibility leaves players with the space to fully immerse themselves in that experience. This game comes with a lot of great features, which were revealed in an hour-and-a-half-long Twitch livestream. And you can watch the full video on Fantasy Flight's YouTube page. Link will be in the description below, but I'm going to break down the standout information for you here. So first, the board has 3D builds, and this is just like a cool thing, but it looks like Descent has standee bases and 3D stairs in order to create levels, as well as 3D objects to populate those levels. And most dungeon crawls lack a Z-axis element to their maps, so this is going to be a great visual element with cool mechanical opportunities that I'm very excited about. Also, as someone who's colorblind, back then, there were red lines showing like this is higher ground or this is an obstacle, and those were impossible for me to see. So I welcome a cleaner and more accessible representation of the map, even though it makes the box so large. The app also has an undo button. While I greatly enjoyed accepting the horrible consequences of my actions in Descent, as well as other Fantasy Flight app-driven board games like Mansions of Madness, Imperial Assault, Lord of the Rings, there is something incredibly demoralizing when, oops, I clicked the wrong button, sends the game somewhere you didn't mean it to, or when you completely misunderstood what the app was trying to tell you. And this is the first Fantasy Flight app to include an undo button, and I commend them for finally including this feature because it gives the players the power to undo. And it's a good faith effort by the game designers to give us control over our experiences so that every group can maximize its fun by having the experience that we want. It's also a drop-in, drop-out campaign style. So if you've seen my video on drop-in, drop-out RPG campaigns, you'll know I'm especially excited that this game has allowed flexibility here. And this means that players can experiment with playing different characters or not stop the rest of the group from being able to play if they can't make it. All of the enemies have bases with slots in them. They have an effective enemy differentiation. So you can slide in a chip with hash marks to differentiate which is Wraith 1 versus Wraith 2. Fantasy Flight never had a clean solution to this in any of their other board games, so this finally feels like they got it right. The app will also track each enemy's health and conditions and will also roll defense for them so that you don't have to. There's also unique enemy tactics. Instead of every enemy just being about hitting you over and over to death, the enemies will have other unique goals managed by the app. The designer wanted to keep the details of these secret, but did reveal one example. Bandit enemies will try to steal chests from the level and run away with them. And this is great because it adds an extra layer of tactical depth. Is killing the bandits to get the chest important when you're under assault by something more menacing? There's also unique character interaction. A new feature of this app is that you drag your character portrait onto the terrain or object that you're going to interact with. And that can trigger unique options or outcomes for you if you are that specific character. If you have, say, advantages or personal stakes in that object. Now, before, it didn't really matter who interacted with what, but now you'll have to decide smarter, and it deepens the role play and the exploration. And even items themselves have hidden possibilities that will be revealed by the app when appropriately triggered. One such example was the Lucky Charm, which underneath its known ability also says, also, you are uniquely lucky. Instead of mechanizing everything up front, the mysterious properties of magical items get to stay mysterious until it's revealed by the app. The game also encourages heroic role playing. Characters have virtues, and when characters make choices in the app that align with those virtues, they're rewarded down the line with certain surprises that were not revealed. There's also lots of cool mechanics. Movement is not an action. So in second edition, you only got 2 actions, and one usually had to be to move unless you wanted to try to hit twice. And now you get movement points in addition to your actions, so your characters will be more mobile. I would also assume that the monsters will get to be more mobile too as a result, so watch out. There's also no more resting action. In second edition, when your character took too much fatigue from using abilities, you'd have to waste an action to rest in order to clear fatigue at the end of the turn. And now fatigue goes on the ability cards themselves, and you can simply flip the card to a different ability on the back in order to clear the fatigue. And the coolest thing about this game, I think, is this flipping mechanic that they've introduced. The game comes with clear card sleeves so that you can put any 2 cards of the same category together, allowing you to easily customize combinations. So if you want to switch weapons, you flip to show the other weapon card that you sleeved. If your ability is out of uses or not relevant, you can flip it to get access to a different ability. There's also crafting and special abilities. It appears to be part of the in-app crafting menu, and as you adventure, the app tracks materials that you've collected, which you can then craft with. The exciting part that I saw in this preview screen was you can select your weapon and then choose special abilities for your weapon that the app calculates and triggers when they apply in the game. So for example, this witch hazel bow has an ability called Silken String if the target's health is less than 7 after the attack it's defeated. Since the app tracks enemy health and which 2 weapons you're using for the adventure, the app can immediately defeat enemies with less than 7 health without putting the onus of remembering to do that on the player. All right, so those are all the cool features, but what's the catch? The price tag for this game is $175. Now, however, for the reasons above, as well as the stunning production value of its 3D pieces and its miniatures, it seems to be well worth the price tag to have a Dungeon Delver game where no one is left to hold the bag of calculating anything. Every player gets to focus on all of the things that make Dungeon Delvers cool: exploring, role-playing, tactical combat, and meaningful choices. I'm fairly confident that this will be their best app-driven board game yet, and I am very excited. They seem to have learned from all of other previous iterations of board games that use apps and have taken the best from it while removing some of the worst. Our group is my personal group is splitting the cost to pre-order it. So as soon as I get my hands on it and play it, I'll make sure to let you know what I think. If there's any features that you're excited about that I might have missed or that I didn't, let us know in the comments below. So, guys, I know that Descent is not in anybody's wheelhouse here, but I do know that we've all dungeon delved in some form. How do you feel about a board game app being able to dictate that stuff over having someone take care of that and just kind of letting stuff be a little more reactive to what the players are doing?
Everything that you said sounded cool as hell. I just was like blown away every time. I thought, man, that sounds really fun.
I think for a dungeon delver, I'm all for it. For a more narrative tabletop role-playing game side of experience, it just can't do it the way a human being can in that role. But that's not the kind of game we're talking about. So yeah, I think for realizing that sort of dungeon delving, tactical monster fighting stuff, it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's really neat. As a GM or a DM, I would love something like that just to handle all of the numbers crap so I can focus on telling a good story and role-playing the motivations of the NPCs or monsters involved. I'm all for using a prosthetic brain to take that mental load away from me.
Yeah, no kidding.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, like, how cool... There's these games coming now that, like this one, that's really straddling the line of board game and video game, don't you think? Like this one,
absolutely.
From everything that you were showing in those videos, in the video clips and everything, there's like, it's not just like Mansions of Madness had the app that integrated, but this has got like all sorts of electronic components that integrate with the app that tell the app different pieces of information, and then you've got crafting in the app. Like, I feel like I'm playing an MMO. It seems really cool. I love that Fantasy Flight is going all in and really brainstorming and thinking like, how now that we know that apps can augment a game, how can we really not just like slap it on, but really make a unique game experience that could not exist without this app, you know?
Right, it has like a feedback loop between the two.
And I just feel like so much of my enthusiasm for this game is just ripped away by that price tag. They should have really figured out some way to keep the price tag for the game to under $100. Because 175 for a board game, you're going to have some gaming groups that are going to be willing to pitch in and all do that together. But then there's the question of who owns the game at that point, and which gaming group. And sometimes that works out with certain groups, but that's just not most people's situation. And I could not imagine dropping $175 on a board game. I don't know. Just I spent a little over $100 to get my hands on a copy of Hero Quest on eBay because I thought that was a pretty good deal at the time, and I felt guilty about doing that.
I feel that a lot. Gloomhaven has always interested me, but I've always
So my thought, and it's not about this game, but it's where this game leads us, is could I get an app that takes all of my D&D combat? Like, if I could just enter all of my characters in, right? Everybody adds their character sheet into their version of the app, and I add all of my my encounters, right? I just drag and drop my encounters, and then when it's time to like fight, like you just push the button, right? And everybody's on their own smartphones, and you just fight. You know what I'm saying? Like the DM doesn't have to
That's how I ran Neverwinter Nights back in the day. That's what I loved so much about that game, is I'd be running things in DM mode, and I'd have my players playing their characters. I could possess or and directly control and role play the NPCs or monsters, drop encounters in, and pause things and let things go turn based or role play, and then let the action go. And the actual combat resolution takes place in real time. It was so nice. We'd be able to have a combat that would take 3 game sessions and resolve it in 10 or 15 minutes, and then get out of the next part of the story. I loved that about it.
I think that could be really, really fun.
That's
just
cool.
like I don't know, like I don't know how complicated it would be to build something like that, but it can't be that complicated, especially if you have the combat system already, built out in pen and paper.
Yeah.
I don't know. So like app people, like holler at me. I want to talk to you about
I will always say though, like a game that like this one is built from the ground up with app integration in mind is probably always going to translate better and feel more cohesive as a whole than trying to take a game that was meant to be played just pen and paper and physical materials.
Yeah.
And trying to automate stuff.
This is also basically a completely different kind of experience than a tabletop role-playing game. Well, maybe not completely different. There's a lot of Venn diagram overlap, but it is a different thing, and maybe it's not best to compare them directly as if they're equivalents.
So imagine with me, though, like if they did a Shadowrun version of this, right? And it was the Arcology shutdown, right? And you could have it's just one adventure, right? But like you could import your characters in, right? Run them through the adventure, and then when you're done, right? Like you can do whatever else you want with them. But like you could play this board game as an adventure with your RPG characters. That would be super freaking cool.
Super cool, but if it's $175, then I'm going like, oh, wow, there's a super cool thing that I can't justify spending the money on.
You know what I will say though, so we have second edition of Descent, and that game was basically all of my materials for my D&D game. So one thing that you can always justify with these kind of like fantasy themed board games when they have high price tags is like you just get an entire set of really badass minis and tiles and maps and stuff to play on.
I've already bought a couple similar kinds of games, so I'm covered there. But yeah, I get what you're saying. I'm not saying it's not worth the price tag. I'm just saying the price tag is prohibitive to
absolutely it is
so many people, and I find that disappointing that they wouldn't have come up with some other solution so that there's some sort of premium cool stuff you can get if you want to spend the money, but you know, you can get into the game for $60 to $80 if you're not down for that.
Yeah.
So that's just I'm sure it's worth it, and it's awesome, and I'm sure it's going to look beautiful, and I look forward to hearing about it and seeing the pictures.
Yeah, I will let you know if it's worth it.
I'm sure it's worth it. It's just a matter of being able to...
One of the last ones we bought was we bought the Lord of the Rings board game, and that one was also app driven. And we were really excited about it. That one was like, I had a price tag of, I think, of 120 maybe. And we were really excited about it, and we liked it at first. And then the actually fun thing, the app was the one that really ruined the experience for us. Because it would do things, and I want to make this a warning note for Fantasy Flight if they're listening to me. They would do things like they would change the there would be no consistency in how objectives would work. So the most prominent thing I can think of is one scenario. Once you get on a boat, you can, like, if one person makes it to the boat, then everybody leaves the map and you win the quest, right? And then the campaign right after that, or the adventure right after that, we were like, the clock was dwindling, and we're like, okay, we have time for this one person to make it to the boat so we can escape. And then the app says, okay, no, all of you need to be at the boat to escape. And it's like, so I really hope that they've learned from it, and like from the tone of the designer. And this is like a little subtle thing I picked up from the tone of the designer of Descent. I don't think she liked the Lord of the Rings game, so I think she's looking to fix some things for sure.
Cool. Sounds cool though. I
feel like any app should have any app tied to a tabletop game experience should have a manual override switch of some kind.
Well, that's why I'm so excited about this undo button. So, all right, well, that is it for this roundup of Descent: Legends of the Dark. Like, share, and subscribe. Support our show over on Patreon, and thank you for watching.